Okay, greetings people. So I thought I would shoot up a video here. I'm following up some of the discussion that's been going on. And this is, I guess, in some way a response or a follow-up, somewhat response to two videos. One was by Doing the Morning, talking about some of the problems with Lane Craig's philosophy, and then also one by Fred Conference Report, who had posted up a video on William Lane Craig being not a complete idiot. And I guess it was, people saw I did take a couple videos down. One where I was shooting a response, and I don't know why, and the other where I was trying to get into this, I guess, this old haggle that I guess, begrudgingly still in, and they keep pulling me back in. There's this sense of I don't know, still having unresolved issues over some of this, despite the fact that I get frustrated with the theist atheist debate. I feel like it goes nowhere. It seems just sort of futile. I did think though that uh, doing the morning's issue about the problem of mathematics and mathematical reality, and this would be the way for me anyway to get at some of this issue. One of the books that I would recommend, many people know I've been working on a project on nothing now for a long time, and it's coming along. But one of the books that's really interesting here, this is called, oh, people can't see that. It's called The Nothing That Is by Robert Kaplan, and got a significant mathematician here talking about the history and development and the uses of zero and how zero entered positional notation, and zero was like a little indent left where the pebble was on the sand, and then when the pebble was removed and it left a little oval there, meaning nothing in this column. And in some ways, the early origin of zero was, again, it was not a number, and part of the problem comes in the history of mathematics about what kind of operations can you perform with zero. This question of divisibility. There's the old standard one. Part of this has to do with problems of subtraction. Zero makes very interesting dynamics when we come to subtraction, right? I think we all know this, things that we learned when we were kids, right? That actually, I think we all know, right? I have 11 fingers, right? I have 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. 6 plus 5 is 11, right? So please, people can help clarify that. That would be wonderful. But the issue here, and this, it goes to Doing the Morning's point that, yeah, mathematics, these are invented, they're human creations, and in many ways it's a human activity as much as a human product, right? I think we want to see math as both an activity of counting, of measuring, of integrating and differentiating, right? Again, this merger and division kind of goes on by way of math, of setting limits, both upper and lower, but that there does seem to be this product out there, this accumulated body of knowledge known as mathematics. And for example, we know what highest prime numbers are to a certain point, and we know what the digits of pi are to a certain decimal place. Okay, so there seems to be, again, something about mathematics that is admittedly a human creation. We don't want to ever forget that. But some of the mathematical regularity that can be found throughout the world it's more than human, although human counting and human use of math opens to that order, and we are part of that order. So it's not as if the world is over there and we're over here, and then we've arbitrarily created a system that's trying to represent it. No, no, no. If anything, it's more like we have emerged out of the same order that the world has, and the mathematical system that we have created, base 10 number system, there's lots of different kinds of number systems, but just our basic number system is from the world insofar as we are, and in a lot of ways it's more complicated than saying that it's simply a human invention, because it is registering an order that is more than human, but of which humans are a part. Okay, now I think one of the ways to maybe get at some of this is to talk about negation again and non-being, and in particular the relationship between zero and the not. And I thought, one way to maybe try to address this is to say that in the same way that zero, in many regards, isn't really a number, but zero is sort of like a punctuation mark that gives a kind of rule for how numbers are to relate. I mean, like, some fun ones for zero, and again, this Kaplan book is so interesting. Any number to the power of zero is one. No, wait. Any any number to the power of zero is one. Any no, that's not right. Any number to the power of 1 is itself. Any number to the power of 0 is 1, but 0 to the 0 is 1? Yeah, see, it's really fascinating when you start to look at what 0 to the 0 is. And, none of that, I guess, do we need to haggle about. The point would be that 0 is related to the not or to the non-being aspect that I've tried to drive at toward the world in many discussions here. I don't think that, by saying there's a kind of non-being that's riding through the world by way of the human, or by way of human consciousness, and in particular the room making that language gives. Part of the issues is that language itself has many different kinds of words. As some kinds of words are, again, positive words. Some are what I've talked about as polar words, and this is Kenneth Burke's terminology. But some are metalinguistic or metacommunicative words, like a word like word or a word like language, where it refers to the verbal order itself. And then one of the oddest words of all is the word not. Yeah, the word not is like 0 in that, in many regards, it doesn't refer to anything. There really is no reference to not, but it doesn't matter because 0 isn't an object, but it's a way of acting with regard to. That is, when you see a 0, it's instructions for acting, and in the same way that not is a kind of meta-communicative rule for introducing boundaries where there are only continuums. Again, the word not is a meta-communicative rule for introducing boundaries where there are only continuums. If I look up my arm, I say my arm is separate from my body, and then my body's over here, and then it also has my arm. Well, what is it that's separating my body from my arm? Well, first the words arm and body, but in another sense, there's nothing. There's nothing that's separating these. It's if we're going to say that the world is fully continuous and acknowledge the kind of lack of any genuine space or gap. Now, again, we can have artificially created vacuums, but those aren't free of electromagnetic energy and other kinds of things. It can be free of matter, but it's not free of all energy. But okay, so we have this sort of space, this gap in the world. I think we want to say, well, where is that space, this gap? Even right here, if you look at the boundary of my body, you can look at it, but we know at the molecular level there's intermingling between the skin and the atmosphere. It's partly why my body has the shape it has. So it seems like the world is continuous, but with words, we can say where one thing begins and something else ends, because I can say, this is not that. Take, where does 2 become 3? Well, I say 1 is not 2 and 2 is not 3. But there's an odd sense of just continuity there along, the world itself is a continuous process. But names and their relations introduce these kinds of boundaries, because this is, I'm sure Fred would be, I think he's familiar with, I think he's mentioned Spencer Brown's laws of form. You can't count what doesn't have a boundary. Right? In order to count something, you have to have a boundary, and it's interesting when you get to this question of, the line between 2 and 3. Well, what is it? Well, it's nothing. And again, nothing, not like a thing. It's when you use the word nothing, you're not referring to a substantive thing. I mean, that would be a something. I mean, there is the word nothing, and that's, I guess, substantial. But the nothing has to be a kind of clearing by which something could not be something else, despite the fact that we know that it's all of one cosmos. That is, that the cosmos doesn't have any outside. There are no outer spaces. That is, if it's outside the universe, well, that's not the universe. So even though, look at what we're doing, that we're not the universe. You see? Notice how the word not actually gets used. Right? There are continuums, and it could be, genus, species. You could do it that way, and then try to watch how when the word not appears, we somehow introduce a gap there. As I'm speaking, there's just an acoustical flow of sound, but you can hear when one word is not the other. Well, where is the boundary that separates one word from another? It's not just in the acoustical profile. Right, I think we've talked about this before. It's in Daniel Dennett's book, Consciousness Explained. He has an output display of the acoustical blast, and the parts that line up between the lowest sound unit, those don't line up to the gaps between the words. That is, sometimes the gaps between the words have lots of sound in there, and the pauses are within a word. The line that separates where one word begins and another word ends is a kind of nothing. I think the point, though, is that mathematics and certain areas of linguistics, when we look at words like not and zero, they start to raise questions about how separate are we from the world and from other people. I mean, there's one sense in which I am not the world. I think that's very obvious. There's another sense in which, well, I'm not the world. I'm of it, I'm from it, I'm as indigenous to it as it is to itself, and yet it can be at a distance from me. Well, what is it that's separating me from the world? Nothing. And I'm not saying that I'm not separated. I think that I am. But what is it that separates me? Well, nothing. It's not just the words, because what is it that separates one word from another? See, it's what is it that separates every figure from a background? I think that's part of the problem. There's Kant, again, I'm not that much of a Kantian, but Kant has a great line where he says, we can imagine space without an object, but you can't imagine an object independent of space. Yeah, the space as condition, and I don't mean, vacuum. I mean the imagining of making room for both entertained mental or eidetic realities like 1, 2, 3, and all of the order that goes on with there, as well as the way that we differentiate the fully continuous spectrum of light into, red, blue, green, indigo, and violet. I mean, it's odd. There's really just continuum there, but with language, I can say that this one is not another one. I'm not sure how, without any words, you could show that you're one thing and the world is not you. Okay, so those are some thoughts. Again, I enjoyed your video quite a bit. Thanks.